Das Kapitol in Washington, D.C. wurde gestürmt. Aber was war da eigentlich genau los? War das zu erwarten? Wie haben die Sicherheitskräfte darauf reagiert? Und wie war es überhaupt vor Ort? Darüber spreche ich mit Hans Knoll. Er ist Politikwissenschaftler und Professor an der Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. Hans, wie überrascht warst du von den Ereignissen, die sich da beim Kapitol abgespielt haben?
So we definitely knew that there were going to be protesters here, and so we expected there to be something, and I expected there to be some clashes. We expected there to be maybe an attempt to get into the Capitol. I was surprised that Capitol security wasn't more effective. The Capitol Police are usually very effective. You can talk to tourists about stories about someone tries to take a photo and they get too close to the building and then they're told that they need to move away. And so it's sort of surprising that they were able to get in so quickly and that they overwhelmed the Capitol Police. That is surprising. It's surprising they were able to get inside the building. And it's surprising that it took so long for National Guard to be able to get there and to eventually move them back. But otherwise, we were expecting there to be something. There are often protests in the city, and so that's not terribly surprising. We knew that there was going to be something yesterday, but that it got to that level was quite a shock.
Was ist deine Einschätzung? Ist die Demokratie stark genug, um solche Szenen auszuhalten?
I do think it's interesting and sort of a silver lining to note that less than 6 hours after members of Congress had to stop debating because of the assault on the Capitol, they were back on the floor doing their work and debating again. Right. So the assault begins a little after 1 o'clock, but they didn't actually have to stop doing their work until a little after 2. And then by a little after 8 o'clock, they're back doing their work again. And then they stayed with it. They continued. They worked well into the night and finished what they were supposed to do. So it interrupted the work of the legislature, but it didn't stop it, which is nice to see. It suggests that American democracy was resilient in that way. What's more likely, though, is that these kinds of events will slowly erode support for democracy. They'll erode civil liberties. The next time that a group of people gather for a protest, now maybe we need to have more police presence, which makes it harder to have peaceful protests that don't translate into we're never going to translate into violence, but now you have more restrictions, those kinds of things. There's less trust in the democratic process because this is the kind of thing that happens sometimes. And then that erodes over the long haul. And that's a bigger, I think, concern.
Wäre das Ganze ohne Trump auch passiert?
Of course, had Trump not been president, this wouldn't have played out the way that it did. I mean, the group of people who assaulted the Capitol were summoned to Washington, D.C. by Trump to have a rally. He had the rally in front of the White House and told them at the rally a bunch of times about how he really had won the election and how what was happening at the Capitol was unfair. He told them those stories that these are lies, they're not true. He told them those things. And then he said, let's go to the Capitol. You should go to the Capitol and let's, cheer on the people who are going to support us at the Capitol and not the ones that don't. And he told them to go to the Capitol. And so, if there was nobody in Washington who was doing that, then the event wouldn't have played out that way.
Ganz generell gesprochen, würden Sie Donald Trump dafür die Schuld geben?
I mean, he bears some serious responsibility for it. Absolutely. He brought these people to Washington. He told them repeatedly that he had won the election, that the election was being stolen from him. This isn't true, right? The allegations of fraud that were enraging these people are both greatly exaggerated and invented. I mean, there are, elections are complicated and things happen, but nothing like the kinds of allegations that he is floating are existing. And most of them are just invented out of thin air.
Die Black Lives Matter-Proteste. Die Gouverneurin von Michigan wurde bedroht und jetzt das hier. Ist das der neue politische Alltag in den USA?
With Trump no longer in the White House, some obvious things will happen differently that will play out differently. Had Trump not been the president and things were happening the way that they were happening yesterday, the National Guard would have been present sooner, presumably, and things would have played out yesterday differently. Had Trump not been president in the summer, then the presence of federal forces in cities would have been different, and the clashes would have been presumably different. And so there's a lot of ways in which who is president and who is in power can change the way a lot of these clashes play out, and could make them less confrontational instead of more.
Mittlerweile ist es belegt, die ganze Sache war geplant. Auf Twitter, auf Facebook oder auf Parler haben sich die Leute dazu verabredet und Donald Trump hat ja auch was dazu getweetet. Wieso wusste man das nicht? Wieso war man so schlecht vorbereitet und was hätte getan werden müssen?
That is a really good question, and I don't know the answer. It does seem that the Capitol Police were insufficiently ready. We do know that DC Mayor Muriel Bowser knew that things were going to happen. She asked for the National Guard to be ready. She encouraged citizens that were not going to be involved in protests to stay home, don't get involved in clashes. And so people knew that something was going to happen. And I certainly expected there to be a stronger police presence than there was. So what happened there is something that I think we're going to see investigations into to see why they weren't more prepared. We do know that at least some of the problem was that because Washington, D.C. isn't a state, it doesn't have quite the same authority to do things like mobilize the National Guard that a state would have. And that's one reason why they didn't have the ability to organize, and it took a little bit longer.
Danke, Hans, für deine Einschätzung. Was haltet ihr von diesen Vorkommnissen in Washington? Schreibt uns in die Kommentare.